Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have part 2 of my July wrap up. So I have already filmed, edited, posted, whatever, part 1 of this, and I will link it up here if you haven't seen it. But that video does include all of my reading statistics for July, as well as my reviews on the first 5 books that I read in the month. So this video is going to contain the last 6 books I read in the month of July, 4 of which were for the reading rush. Normally when I start my wrap-ups, I do give you a little bit of insight into the month or an overview. However, I did cover that in the first part of this video, and so I'm just going to get straight into my reviews. So the 6th book that I read in the month of July was Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. This is the final book in the Grisha trilogy, which is a young adult fantasy series that follows a girl named Alina who has been drafted into the army as a cartographer. This series does take place in a Russian-inspired world, and there is a shadowy area of darkness called the Fold that bisects the country of Ravka. One day when Alina is crossing the Fold, her friends and companions do end up in danger, and this leads Alina to reveal a hidden power that she did not know that she had. Because of this, she is whisked away to the Grisha Academy where other people with magical abilities are trained, and the doors are opened to this whole new life of luxury and privilege that she previously did not have access to. So this is the final book in the trilogy, so I can't really tell you too much about what's going on here. I have buddy read this entire trilogy with Jade from JD Ray Reads, and we will be continuing on through the Grishaverse and reading the Six of Crows duology and King of Scars. This was definitely my favourite series in the trilogy so far. There were moments of high emotion in here. This trilogy was a reread for me as well, but there were definitely a lot of things that happened in here that I forgot, especially a lot of the things surrounding Nikolai. So while I do already know the outcome of the story, and I did remember the final scenes are the big thing that happens at the end, a lot of the main plot points throughout the middle of the book I had just completely forgotten. I did give this book 4 stars. I haven't given a single book in the Grisha trilogy 5 stars. I don't know why, and I can't pinpoint what exactly it is that's missing that stopped me from giving any of the books in this series 5 stars. But I did really enjoy this. I absolutely love Leigh Bardugo's writing style. This series is a little bit tropey. I think the final book was published in 2014 or 2015, so it's a teensy bit outdated, and you do find a lot of the tropes that we are tired of seeing in young adult fantasy today. However, I don't believe that this trilogy actually deserves the bad rep that it gets, because it's not that bad. It's a decently written series. Yes, the plot is predictable, but at the time it was released it wasn't as predictable, and yes, it does contain a lot of tropes, but there are reasons that tropes are tropes. It is because we love them and we want to read more stories that follow the same kind of similar themes. So I would definitely recommend this if you haven't read it yet. Just bear in mind it is quite a few years old, but I don't think it's as bad as everybody says it is. And I did also read this for the book Junkie Trials. It fulfilled the prompt for the Elven Guard, which was to read a book with war, military or political themes. The next 4 books I read were books for the reading rush, the first of which was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This was a library book. I have since returned it. I did pick this book up on Cody from Cody's Book Corners recommendation, and going into it I didn't really know all that much about it. I did listen to this via audiobook. The audiobook is on script, and I do think that that was a very good audiobook. You guys may know that I'm a little bit picky about audiobooks. I don't listen to a whole lot of them, but I think that this one was very well done. Oyinkan Braithwaite is a British Nigerian author, and the audiobook was narrated by a British Nigerian woman. And as the story is set in Nigeria, I do think that listening to the audiobook added a little bit to my personal experience, because there were a few instances of Nigerian slang or Nigerian honorifics that were definitely easier to understand via the audiobook format, because obviously you have inflection and tone and context when listening to an audiobook, whereas when you encounter unfamiliar phrases or words when you're physically reading, it takes your brain a little bit more time to kind of process them and get the context yourself. So the plot of My Sister the Serial Killer is that we follow our main character who is a nurse, and her sister is known for killing her boyfriends. So the first time that it happened, her sister told our main character that it was self-defense. He tried to attack her and she had defended herself. It then happened another time and her sister said the same thing, and then this story starts out when her sister has killed her 3rd boyfriend, and our main character is getting just a little bit sick of her shit. So that's kind of where we start the novel, and then the main storyline is that our main character is attracted to one of the doctors that she works with at the hospital, but one day her sister does come into her place of work and meets the doctor, who then becomes very attracted to the main character's sister, and our main character does not want her sister to kill this man that she is attracted to. I did mark this down as being an adult thriller. However, this is very difficult to categorize. I feel like this book is very much a slice of life kind of thriller. I don't really like to say that it's a slice of life because there is a definite plot that runs through the story. However, this book definitely focuses more on the familial bond between the two sisters, their history and things that have happened to shape them in their past traumas, and also the nuances of their relationship with each other, more than it focuses on the fact that her sister is murdering people. So while I did categorize it as a thriller, I wouldn't say that it was particularly thrilling, and it wasn't a mystery because we know from the offset who the killer is, but it definitely is like a thriller slice of life kind of book. I did give this 4 stars because I found the ending to be a little bit lackluster. The ending actually really annoyed me because after everything that's happened and just the attitude of this girl's sister, she is the absolute worst. She's trying to find an alibi for herself that covers her during one of these murders, and she's trying to do it in a way that incriminates her sister, like, oh, I'll tell them that you were sleeping with my boyfriend and that's why we were both there. And our main character's like, wait, hang on a minute, like I helped you out here and you are trying to ruin my reputation. I definitely enjoyed their relationship and the way that they worked. I enjoyed learning about their history and the family as a whole. The ending just pretty much ruined it for me. I definitely was not satisfied and I did not like how it went down. I then read Legion and Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. This is another library book and this is also a bind-up of 2 novellas. Now both of the novellas in this bind-up are very different. Emperor's Soul is the reason that I picked this book up from my library, and that is because it is a novella that's set in the same world as Elantris, and Legion is a sci-fi slash paranormal detective kind of story. So they were both very different. I gave both novellas 4 stars, which gives the bind up a 4-star rating overall, but I did enjoy Emperor's Soul more than Legion, but as they are 2 very different genres, I kind of rate differently because I expect different things from each genre, if that makes sense. So starting off with Legion, in this story we follow a detective and he lives in a mansion, and in every room in his mansion he has a hallucination. So he knows that they're a hallucination, but to him they are also very real. And as he is a detective, he kind of has a hallucination for every scenario, if you will. So one of them is really knowledgeable about history and can place things in history or give you the history of an item. One of them is a translator who speaks a lot of languages. One of them is really good at detecting lies and also interrogating people. One of them is really good with weaponry. So each hallucination kind of fills a purpose that our main character Stephen needs in his work as a detective. It is very interesting the way that this works because some of the things that these hallucinations know, if they were truly hallucinations, our main character would have to know, but apparently he doesn't. So it is very interesting how that works. In the story it is hypothesized that he is schizophrenic, so we have rep in there for schizophrenia. I'm not sure how good the rep is because I can't speak for it myself personally, but each of his hallucinations do also have their own issues, like one of them has OCD. So there is a lot of mental health rep in here, a lot more than I expected from a sci-fi slash paranormal detective story. Now I can't say for sure whether he is schizophrenic because with it being sci-fi paranormal, it could be a whole other reason for having these hallucinations, or they're not actually hallucinations. But from the first novella it's hard to tell because it was only around 80 pages and it focused on the mystery in this particular story, which was that a camera that could see into the past had been stolen. I enjoyed a lot of aspects about this. I thought it was funny. I enjoyed the banter between Stephen and his hallucinations and also anybody else that he encountered. It did pretty much just read like a typical paranormal detective series, kind of like the Dresden Files. It was that kind of thing, pretty standard for its genre, and I did enjoy it, so I gave it 4 stars. Now the Emperor's Soul I did really enjoy, and I think it had a lot of complexity considering it was a novella. It was around 120 pages and it followed a woman who is something called a forger. In this world you can create items, and then if you have a forger work on them, it can transform them into something better than they are. So for example, you could buy a mass-produced table that was made at a factory, and if you have a forger work on it, they kind of go back in the table's history and change little things. So for example, a master craftsman worked on this instead of it being made in a factory, and then it will turn into this elaborate ornate piece of furniture. Now there are restrictions to this magic system, so if you ask for something too outlandish, then the forgery won't hold and it will just revert back to its original state. But that is kind of how the magic system works in this story. So we follow a woman who is a master forger. She is caught and imprisoned, and somebody high up in the government approaches her and asks her to help them, as on the same day that she was imprisoned there was an assassination attempt on the Emperor's life, and he is now an empty shell of himself. He did experience some head trauma, and the thing that makes him him has disappeared, so he assumedly has some degree of brain damage. So the forger then has to take on the task of learning everything she can about the history, personality, likes and dislikes of the Emperor so that she can make a forgery of his soul. I definitely enjoyed this. Brandon Sanderson is known for his magic systems and how well done they are and how well done he writes fantasy worlds. I do really like his writing style as well. I feel like he writes high fantasy in a way that makes it extremely complex and extremely detailed, and there's a lot going on there, but it is not hard to digest at all. His writing style is very palatable, and I definitely understand why people recommend Brandon Sanderson as an introduction into epic fantasy. It has been a year since I read Elantris, and I did really enjoy that novel and was excited to move on to Mistborn, but I'm definitely 100 times more excited to move on to Mistborn now that I have sort of reignited my enjoyment of Brandon Sanderson's writing. So overall, I did give this novella bind up 4 stars, and I would recommend if you're a fan of Brandon Sanderson and have not read his novellas yet, as there is still a whole ton of complexity in there. As you guys know, I don't really like short fiction, but I thought both of these short stories were very well done. And for the Book Junkie trials, I did read this to fulfill the prompt for Queendom Stone, which was to read a book that featured royalty. I then read The Umbrella Academy Dallas by Gerard Way and Gabriel Barr. This is the second volume in the Umbrella Academy graphic novel series. This was the final part of the graphic novel series. They have reignited it on the back of the success of the TV show that is based on this series, and the next volume will be out, I think, this month, although I'm not entirely sure. So if you are unfamiliar with this graphic novel series or the show, it follows a group of superheroes, I want to say, although some of them may be considered anti-heroes. They were all born on the same day, they all have different mothers, and they were adopted or bought essentially by this billionaire inventor called Reginald Hargreaves, who then trained them in their abilities and sort of set them upon the world as child superheroes, so they would save the world from catastrophes such as the Eiffel Tower coming alive and trying to kill people kind of thing. However, in the present day timeline, these children have grown up. They are all in their 30s now. Most of them resent their father and resent their upbringing, but they have all reunited at their childhood home as their father has died and the apocalypse is incoming. So I picked this up because I'm a huge fan of the TV show. I would probably say that Umbrella Academy and Stranger Things season 3 are the best things that I've watched so far this year, and my favourite thing about the TV show is the grey morality. I would say that every character in this series is morally grey, and like I said, quite a few of them would be considered anti-heroes, but I felt that volume 1 did not really portray that very well. I feel like it lacked a lot of backstory and it didn't give the characters as much depth as the show did, and I also felt like the plot of the first volume was very rushed. Now, I thought this was going to be a continuation from the first one, and it is, but the way that it works in the show is that this plotline from the second volume of the graphic novel has been integrated into the first one, and I feel like that works really well because it fleshes out the plot and it doesn't feel like you have too many plots running at the same time. It just embellishes and fleshes out the existing plot to make it into a more complex story, which is what I loved about the show. I did give this volume 4 stars because I feel like this volume was what added a lot of backstory that the first volume didn't. The first volume read a lot just like a superhero story with a lot of action scenes, and this fleshed out the characters, added a ton of backstory and motives and things like that, which I really appreciated, and so I gave this volume 4 stars. I then read Club Dead by Charlaine Harris, which is the third book in the Sookie Stackhouse series, which is a paranormal romance series that follows Sookie Stackhouse, who is a barmaid who can read minds. She soon realizes that she can't read the minds of vampires and then quickly becomes romantically involved with one, which ends up with her being dragged into a world of vampire politics, as her ability to read people's minds is very useful to them in a interrogation situation. So this series is no great work of literary fiction. I did give this book 3 stars, I think, although I didn't enjoy it as much as the second one. I think the second one is my favourite so far. There are a lot of things that kind of annoy me about this series, but at this point I've kind of just accepted that it is just fun. It's not trying to be too serious. There are some things that annoy me, just the way the story's written and how Charlaine Harris says things in like book 1 that are only explained in like book 8 or whatever, so she leaves like things unresolved and it really annoys me. But there are some things that I do like about this series. I do like that they're fun when there is smut in them, which there has only really been smut in the first book so far. The smut is really good. I kind of view series like this as being episodic, so each book is kind of like an episode of a TV show, so there is kind of an overarching plot, but there is a self-contained small like murder mystery plot in each installment, which I do find those plots to be relatively well done. I believe that Charlene Harris is mainly known for writing cozy mysteries, so I'm pretty confident in assuming that she knows how to write a mystery plotline. There were characters introduced in here that I did like. Bill was absent for a lot of this, which I definitely appreciated. We also had the introduction of Alcide, I think I said that right, who I looked up, and I think Joe, I'm gonna butcher this, Joe Manganiello plays him in the TV show, who I know from One Tree Hill. He played Owen in One Tree Hill, so that got me hella excited. And then Eric is in this a lot as well, so those definitely spiced up this book for me. I just didn't find the mystery plotline to be as compelling as I did in the second book. However, on my August Bookopoly TBR, I do have the 4th book in this series, which a lot of you guys have told me that it is the best book in the series, or your favorite book in the series, and Bobby has also told me that it has the best shower sex scene that she has ever read, and I do believe that Eric is also in book 4 a lot, so you never know, we could get a 4-star rating from me on one of the books in the series when I read book 4, but this one was 3 stars. I enjoyed it enough. You know by now that there's things that annoy me, but I do like this series as little palette cleansers. And for the Book Junkie trials, I read this for Forgotten Forest, which was to read the next book in a series. And then lastly, the last book that I read in the month of July was my least favorite book of the month, which is sad because I had like okay expectations going into it, but that was Stardust by Neil Gaiman. I gave this book 2 stars. I didn't like it. So I don't think that my opinion is too unpopular saying that I didn't like Stardust. This was the group book, or the Bookie Grail for the Book Junkie trials, so a lot of people read it. Not many people liked it. There are quite a few people who do enjoy it, and I kind of see why. But this is my second book that I've read by Neil Gaiman, and I didn't love it. I know Jane and Gary have recommended that I read Neverwhere, and then somebody else has also recommended that I read The Ocean at the End of the Lane. So there are still a few Neil Gaiman books that I will sample, but the 2 that I've read so far, which is Stardust and Norse Mythology, I haven't been a fan of. So if you do not know the plot of Stardust, I was familiar with it before going into this from watching the movie, which I love, although I don't know if I'll ever watch it again after reading this book, because I think it'll just make me angry. So we follow Tristan, who is the son of a sheep farmer and a mysterious woman from the land of Fairy. Now, Tristan is in love with this woman called, well, in love with a woman called Victoria. He has asked her for a kiss or her hand in marriage, and she says, if you go and capture that falling star, then I will give you whatever your heart desires. So Tristan then goes on an adventure through the land of Fairy to find the star, and it is just about what happens to him on the way. He encounters lots of crazy little people. This is very fairy tale-esque. It reads like a fairy tale, and it definitely has the whimsical nature of a fairy tale. It took me a long time to figure out why I wasn't enjoying this. There were some things that I picked up on straight away, like I didn't like the grammatical choices that Neil Gaiman was making writing this book. To make the prose a little bit more whimsical, he would rearrange the sentences. I'm not even sure for the grammatical turn of what he did. I'm not sure if he reordered the clauses or something like that, but it definitely interrupted the flow when I was reading, because I had to go back and read the sentence to make it make sense in my head, just because of the way that Neil Gaiman had flipped his sentences around. I also found some of the dialogue to be very Tweedledum Tweedledee-esque, which I didn't appreciate. I found it to be very tedious. So those are a couple of things that I picked up on straight away that I just wasn't a fan of and why I wasn't enjoying this. But then there were a few chapters in the middle. We had 2 or 3 chapters that I was kind of enjoying, and I was like, okay, the book's getting good now. And then by the end, I just found that I didn't care, and I just wanted it to be over all over again. And this book is not long. I'm not sure how long the standard edition is, because I was reading the large print edition, but my copy had 270 pages. And as I just said regarding the novellas, you guys know that I don't like short fiction. But the reason why I didn't like this book that I finally came upon right near the end of the book is that it's too long. If this story was a maximum of 100 pages, I think I would have really enjoyed it, and it would have cut out all of the tedium that is added just to make it more whimsical and more like a fairy tale. But as it stood at 200 and whatever pages, I just wasn't interested. There's this storyline of this group of brothers who are also trying to recover the star, and by the time you get to the end, they are relevant. But there was a point just past the middle where I was like, why are these guys even, did they have to be part of this story? They weren't necessary. And while it does pay off at the end and they are relevant, it was tedious. It was tedious, and I didn't enjoy it. I felt it was too long. I didn't like the writing, and the dialogue was driving me insane, essentially. And that is all I have to say about this book. I'm glad I've read it and that I will never have to read it again. So that is it for my July wrap up. I'm not sure how long my wrap up for August is going to be, or whether it will be in 2 parts, but this is the 4th of August when I'm filming this video, and I have already finished 3 books. I'm pretty confident that you will be seeing a mid-month wrap up from me in the middle of August, but please let me know if you have read any of the books that I have talked about today and if you enjoyed them. And please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to. If you head to my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.